Peter Walsh, the leader of the Victorian Nationals. Great to have you with us again on Flow.
Thank you, Rikki.
You've penned a letter to the editors of newspapers around the district about the pandemic powers of the Andrews government. Can you just outline the main concerns about the bill that's passed the lower house?
So the bill that has passed the lower house and will be in the upper house next week, Pandemic Powers Bill, gives the Premier and the Health Minister unprecedented powers over people's lives in Victoria without any oversight from the Parliament. It is something that the President of the Bar Council said that the Stasi police of the old East Germany would have been proud of the powers that would be given out in this bill. So it is something that all Victorians should be very, very concerned about. And it's something that we've all had in our offices, lots of emails, lots of phone calls, lots of people coming in expressing their concerns about the powers that will be granted to the Premier and to the Health Minister if this bill passes the upper house. And what we're doing is urging people to go to the website to electronically sign the petition to voice their concerns about this particular piece of legislation. So go to the usual www.laborpowergrab.com.au and register your concerns so that the Andrews government know that people are not happy with these powers that are going to be granted to the Premier and the Health Minister.
And we spoke with, I think it was a Shooters MLC from eastern part of the state about he wasn't consulted. It does sound like the government's going to go to the usual suspects to get this over the line in the upper house?
Well, as I would understand it, the government has done a deal with the Greens, Fiona Patten from the Reason Party and Andy Meddy from the Animal Justice Party to try and get this legislation through. So I'd also urge anyone that is concerned, and everyone should be concerned, to contact those three upper house MPs and voice people's opinion that they should change their position, not support the Andrews government to give themselves unprecedented powers over Victorians' lives into perpetuity, basically. That we've all lived through the last 18 months. We've seen what's happened in Victoria under the health orders. This legislation is those health orders on steroids.
Now, there's been a concern about the deaths that occurred during one of the previous outbreaks with COVID-19. Does the opposition have a position regarding having a royal commission into that and the other events of the handling of the pandemic?
Yes, we do, Rikki. So if we're elected to government next November, we will have a royal commission that has the powers to actually call ministers and call senior bureaucrats and make them answer under oath. With the Coates inquiry, with all due respect to those that were involved, the answers were not found. We need, as a state, to know the failings and successes if there was successes, so that if there ever is another pandemic, we actually have the learnings out of it. Just saying we've moved on is not good enough. We need to go back and really seriously, forensically examine what was done and what the learnings are so that we can keep Victorians safe in the future.
Now, speaking of inquiries, one that's underway at the moment is this independent broad-based anti-corruption commission inquiry where Adam Somyurek, former Labor Minister, has been giving evidence, and the so-called red shirts affair, the opposition, you think that maybe needs to be reinvestigated after the evidence heard this week?
So most of the MPs that were allegedly involved in the red shirt rorts of the 2014 election declined to give evidence at that time. I think what Adam Somyurek evidence at the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission has said is that Labor were very proud of what they did. In his words, it was a gold standard rort, and seriously, it needs to be re-examined now on the back of that evidence that it's no longer good enough to say, I'm not going to talk about it from the Premier. It's no longer satisfactory to say that's in the past. This is about using taxpayers' money. All the people are listening to your show, it's using money out of their pocket to do Labor Party activity, which is very, very much against the rules of the Parliament, and and the Labor Party should be punished for that, rather than just saying they're going to pay the money back.
And Premier Daniel Andrews, I understand Mr Somyurek has sort of lined him up maybe on the opposite factional side within the party that what is the exact assertion he's made about Mr Andrews' involvement on the left side of Labor?
Well, my understanding from the evidence that's been given, Rikki, is that both sides of the Labor Party, the left and the right, have been doing similar things. It's very important that IBAC get to the bottom of this, and whoever has done something wrong be held to account for it. The Premier is not above the law of this state and never should be. So if the Premier does need to give evidence, if the Premier is found to do something wrong, he should be held to account just the same as any other Victorian.
Your colleague for the Nationals, Tim Bull, who's the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, we've spoken to him extensively leading up to Anzac Day about COVID-safe handling of that. There's been a frustration from sub-branches in the RSL that, again, they're in the dark somewhat about how things will proceed for Remembrance Day on the 11th of November.
Rikki, tragically, that is still the case, that there is confusion about what the rules are and what sub-branches can do when it comes to Remembrance Day. My advice to sub-branches is Remembrance Day is too important not to have an event that acknowledges the sacrifices that were made by past and current generations when it comes to keeping Australia safe. And people should maintain social distancing, but it is important to actually make sure there are events held. Tragically, the government hasn't given clear, specific instructions as to how they can be held, so it is up to RSL sub-branches to make some choices themselves, but I would urge them to make sure they do hold a service. I personally will be going along and laying a wreath in Swan Hill myself. It is too important a day for us not to acknowledge all those that have made sacrifices over the generations.
And just lastly, what for you is the significance and importance of Remembrance Day?
Well, Remembrance Day gives us the nation that we are and the freedoms that we have as a country compared to a lot of other places in the world. And I think it's all too easy sometimes to take that for granted. But if you look particularly at the First World War, the Second World War, conflicts, Korea, what's happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq, the contribution that our armed services made, it's about giving us the freedoms and the democracy that we enjoy as a country, and we owe it to those people that made those sacrifices to show our respects on Remembrance Day as we do on Anzac Day.
Well, Peter Walsh, leader of the Victorian Nationals, thanks for joining us today on Flow.
Thanks, Rikki.